Welcome to the show, Rick Speck.
What up, though?
What up with it? What up with it? So, first and foremost, 17 winners represents the 15 years plus 2 years aside, like I said, right? But the podcast in itself is for those who are like me and for those who love, support, and see you making positive impact on the communities that you affected, right? So I specifically chose you to be on this podcast for those reasons. You represent, and I wanted to make sure because I listen to podcasts myself, and I understand that we ain't getting our flowers when we're supposed to. This is a podcast for those of us who've actually been through it. We did it. We ain't of the innocent. We committed the crime. We did the dirt in the community. We affected people negatively. And we came home with the desire to correct that, to fix that, or at least to do something to affect people in a different direction than we did before. With that being said, bro, I just want you to explain a little bit about yourself, man. Where you come from, how much time you did,
A little bit about me?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so like you said, my name's Rick Speck. Born and raised in Detroit. Moved from Detroit, east side, to the suburbs at a young age, and kind of felt the effects of being from an urban neighborhood right then because they wanted to hold me back a grade just because I'm coming from Detroit public schools to the burbs, right? No other reason than that, sure, right? They didn't feel I was going to be able to compete, so to speak, right? So I felt like I came with a chip on my shoulders right from the gate, And I think for me, it was like those small traumas that continued on, right? Being a Mexican kid that was mixed Mexican and German coming from a primarily all black community, right, yeah, to an all white community for the most part.
That's a whole culture difference,
right? And then being Latino, right, having this chip on my shoulder, right? My last name is Speck, S-P-E-C-K, right? In German, that translates to like bacon.
Okay.
Oddly
All
enough,
right.
Okay. Little nugget,
geography
right?
lesson.
Right?
Little geography lesson.
But what are Mexicans commonly called? It's derogatory.
Beans, spick, yeah,
right? Yeah. So young white kids started with the spick and speck, right? Oh. So I didn't,
So you automatically was ready to fight.
I'm it's knuckles up from the word go.
Yeah, for sure.
And by and large, it didn't seem like that changed for quite a while, right? Which that, along with other traumas in my life, kind of helped to me to make the poor choices that led to multiple incarcerations, right?
Okay. So hold on, before you go any further, let me ask you this: when was the first time you were incarcerated?
First time I was incarcerated, I was actually 22 years old. Okay. Right. So I wasn't a juvenile. Okay. Right. Never really got into trouble, or at least got caught until my senior year. Drunken night out with some buddies. Don't even remember breaking into supposedly, allegedly, 13 businesses. Right.
One night.
Rampage. On a spree. Right.
That's a rampage.
Right. Yeah. You're right. I mean, that's the definition of crime spree. Here's the bad part. Okay. When I woke up at my mom's house on the couch, still halfway drunk, I didn't know why they were there. Like, it was almost a relief to know that I didn't really seriously do something, like driving my vehicle, like somebody could have got killed. Like,
right, yeah, okay.
The scary part was I didn't know why they were there. Okay. And then they were like, oh, we got a money bag. We got them. And then I knew it had to do with finance.
Right, okay.
Right? But up until that point, I had no idea why I was being arrested, why all these people were in my mom's home. Okay. Right? Like,
so you didn't go to jail, though, for that? You didn't get locked up?
I got bailed out,
jail
got
stuff,
a paid attorney,
right.
Funny thing is, well, not funny, but
you
coincidentally,
had to be
when I got out, though, my mom had all my stuff packed. She said, look, we didn't move out of the city for this, right? Like, I was the oldest of four, right? You got these younger, like, you just can't be here no more.
Yeah, that makes
right?
sense. Yeah.
I got it, but she bailed me out, and she got me a paid attorney. So I couldn't be that mad, right? Like, that was a fair shake to a certain degree. But, again, then that helped shape what happened from there.
Okay.
Because now I'm out here, and I got to take care of me.
Right.
A lot of people don't know, like, I lived in a homeless shelter. I was too proud at the time to ask for help, this, that, and the other. You know, my mom would meet me in the morning and was, you know, it was a life lesson. And as much as it pained her and as much as I didn't understand it all until later, I got it later, but it was like, yeah, I really hit the streets then.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
Like, now I got to feed me, I got to clothe me, and I got to put a roof over my head. So
it wasn't until 22 until you actually went and did a bit.
Right. And that was, again, that was because I'd actually did another crime and was on probation. So they revoked the probation, sent me the joint for 4 to 10 years for that initial crime that had happened like 2 years and 9 months prior.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
I had 2 years center action. You remember Good Time, right? I had 2 years center action. The judge, this is how Macomb County played me. She knew I really wouldn't do any time. I go through quarantine, right? I'd get my number, but because it was a nonviolent crime, 2 years, I basically come home to the center, maybe be there anywhere from 30 to 90 days, be on a tether, and do the rest of my time on a tether. You know what the judge did? She sends me to 4 to 10 years.
Okay.
Then told me, here's your appeal papers. I suggest you use them. But you are going to do time.
So what was your number, like a 2.7?
2.3.
2.3.
I got 2.30, 657.
See, I had 3.58. I came down with the truth and sentencing error.
Well, when I did my 15-year bit,
You
me and
did
you
too, yeah.
coincidentally did 15 years on this
Together,
last stretch.
right.
I came down the same thing, 99, truth
for
and
sure,
sentencing.
for sure. All right, so 22 was the first time you got incarcerated.
Which was like my post-secondary education.
So, yeah, I was just going to say, so, all right, boom. You got the 4 to 10. Eventually, though, we met up during a long stretch.
Right.
So you stumbled a few times on the way there.
Well, I also did a Fed bid in between.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Got mixing a little bank fraud.
Okay, then. You got to mix it up
a
little pizzazz, a little razzle-dazzle.
A little light something, right?
Yeah.
But, all this time, though, really what I did was I sold weed.
Yeah, okay.
That was my hustle. That's what, coincidentally, I've never served time for weed. I've never been busted with weed. But that was my real grind.
Man, free the weed. Free the weed,
You know what I mean? And now it's legal, right?
Yeah, right.
But, for me, though, when I went to the Fed joint, I had this old gangster type dude, man. He was 52 years old at the time when I met this dude, right? And we were building, and he had all these different businesses. He had this life experience. Here I was, this young dude. And he told me about this lick, about going in and robbing this bookie in a southern state. I ain't going to say where, right? In a southern state.
In the southern state.
But dressed as ATF.
Okay.
Okay? This is how we're going to do it. And so this whole idea is born, fast forward, I'm out, I'm moving weed, doing my thing. What happens? Weed starts to dry up. My connect dries up. People ain't, they're not wanting to come off it. We got the cash. People ain't wanting to do it. I got that street mentality.
Mm-hmm.
The bow tie wasn't with me back then, right?
Right.
And I said, well, they don't want to sell it. We're going to take it. So, we impersonated a DEA agent. We just kind of flipped it, right? And we made DEA coats out of coaches' jackets with iron-on letters and baseball. We got a little creative in our thinking because here was our reality. We didn't want to stretch nobody, and we didn't want to get stretched. Like, it was about money. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It wasn't about trying to, we already had the mask on because we know police are like the biggest gangsters there are. Part of that planning
was you being a little older, man. Y'all had a little bit more think through. I was a little dumber with my arm.
Well, there's that, right? Like, I had already done a couple bits, right? Yeah. I had already figured, like, I got to really start to think some of this shit
It's kind of like when you go to the joint the first time or when you get locked up the first time, you figure out how to be a better criminal.
Well, that's all the skills and tools that I was being given at the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what was I being given to make better life choices?
Right, exactly.
Like mentorship. We talk about mentorships and programs and stuff, but there wasn't that then.
Right.
The mentorship we were receiving behind those walls wasn't focused on creating positive change in the community.
Right.
Right? By and large.
Right.
Right? At least the folks I was associating with at that
facts.
time, right?
That's fact.
So, the unfortunate part was when I got out of the Fed joint, I'd only stayed out 10 months before I caught that 15-year bid. right? And so I was young. I didn't make the best choices,
choice,
right? With money.
Yeah.
Because here I was. Now I'm hitting some licks. I'm not investing. I'm still not thinking of the future. I'm doing all the dumb things you can possibly do with money.
Right.
You know what I mean? In all the worst ways. From
Right.
gambling to strip joints to cocaine, like you name it. It was just
wilding.
It was
just wilding. I'm out here. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But at the same time, rationalizing that I'm doing this to take care of my kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I'm providing. When the reality was, I could have did a whole lot of other things to take care of those children, other than putting on a DEA uniform every few months after I jacked a sack.
Facts.
That's just keeping it real, right?
That's just
like in
keeping it real,
hindsight,
yeah.
like, you know, you couldn't have told me that back then.
Right.
But today, I can admit that. I can see that, you know. And I think the point of us sharing all this is so that the people that are listening, right, maybe can take something from this real lived experience and not have to put it to the test and go do 18. For me, I did 18 and a half years behind bars.
You know, it's interesting that you made that point, though, because I think about that when I think about this podcast. Am I going to really reach the people who need to hear it most? Likely not. But I believe that I'll get somebody close to them. And the reason I say likely not is because the people who really need to hear this are probably like 14, 15-year-old me. And they're not the podcast predominantly listeners. But there's somebody around them who will listen to a podcast, who will pull their coattail, who maybe haven't heard this explained in this way. So, yeah, that was a good point that you made that, yeah, the intention is to stop somebody from having to go about it the same way. Hell yeah, prison, this is the reason why I'm like so adamant about my experience, because prison was both the best and worst thing that could possibly have happened to me. I learned to become the best me that I could have been, but I should not have had to go through those experiences to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you shouldn't have had to find out who the best you is inside of that environment.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
No, I agree with you.
So,
and for me, it was the same exact thing. You know, when I look back, the reality is it was both the best and worst. Right? It took me away from my family, that being the worst part of it for me. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
The best part was it probably kept me alive to a certain degree.
To be back with my family properly.
Right? I mean, when you look at what I was doing, what are the repercussions? What are the odds that I'm going to continuously exist in the shadows and not be found out?
Right.
Like, truly, how many of these things can I do?
Right.
Right? I mean, and I know what I would do, right? You take 100 racks off me, I know I'm in my feelings in the worst way.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, we all on the street. This isn't, you know.
For sure. So, like you were just saying, you cumulatively did 18 years?
18 and a half.
18 and a half. So, at some point, you decided that you didn't want to keep doing that. So, like, what was your transition like? Can you, like, help us get into your transition?
So, it was like when you and I met, right, to a certain degree, I had about 5 years left on my 15, right? I had just hit the first level 1 that I'd ever been to in any of the prison terms I did.
Right.
And there was this program coming, you know, Chance for Life, right? Some folks that did time may have heard of it. It was all over about 7 facilities at the time, right? And so they wanted 25 influential people from the yard to participate in the program. And honestly, I wasn't doing anything better, right? I mean, I had read books. I had, you know, studied, you know, trying to educate myself from the library to a certain degree, right? Had even did some, you know, correspondence courses that weren't like accredited schools, but they were just different things that I had learned of, right?
Yeah, it helps you build a palate.
Exactly. I mean,
Tools.
Keeping that exercise going on in your mind, it wasn't just about the weight pit. It wasn't just about pull-ups and push-ups and bear crawls.
Yeah.
And gait. You know what I mean? Like, you had the biggest muscle was in between your ears, and that was the people that stayed.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like we walked out without all the holes because we could outthink them.
You feel me?
I mean, for real, right? Yeah. So I was like, yeah, I'll do this. Well, for me, the reality was, I was put in a small leadership role, and I excelled in it, right? I enjoyed the responsibility, what we were doing. They wanted to make us peacekeepers. They wanted us to teach us mediation, and they knew we needed like a base of skills in order to become effective mediators. Right. So I took this thing and I ran with it, right? And that's where I met you and Sydney, right? Who was like, all of us, Cam, Mario, all these brothers that were in there, we made that happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like Tom and Jessica provided this platform, right, and this core curricula that we built on, expanded, because we said the difference between us at that facility and all the other facilities that it was at was we were in a level 1. We all had outdates.
Mm-hmm.
All those other guys in a lot of them, that same program in these other joints, a lot of them didn't have outdates. And the outdates they did have were like the outdates we started with.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like
so far away that it's not realistic.
Like, it didn't even like...
Yeah.
Like thinking back about 2014 as an outdate in 1999, it was so far removed, it may have just... It was a dream, right?
Right. I thought the cars would be flying. Here they go out here now. They selling 1999 Grand Prix for $2,500 at tax time. Right. I'm thinking cars would be flying by now. Like, well, y'all have phones, failed me.
Right? When we went to the joint, there was still beepers, Nextel, like big
the big
phones,
Nextel
like,
joint.
right?
That's
like,
what I had when I left.
That's
the big Nextel
exactly,
joint.
Me too, right? So it's like we come home to these slim.
Yeah,
right?
Man, these devices, like, these joints are devices.
You can watch movies on them. Like, come on, man. I mean, that was
facts.
And even seeing the commercials.
All right, with that being said, so how was your transition, like, coming home? Like, what were some of the biggest things? Like, what fucked you up the most, like, when you first got
Technology.
Home? Yeah.
Right? Technology by far, social media.
Definitely.
Like, that shit was overwhelming.
Yeah.
The hardest transition for me, though, right? And I think for me was readjusting with my kids again, my daughters. That to me was, and the other thing is when I came home that time, I came home to my baby brother's house. I was living in Grosse Pointe Park, right? I'm in a nice neighborhood. He gave me a year rent free. Come live here, just do get acclimated. We'll discuss rent next year. If I need it, I'll holler at you. But he was like, look, I've been here 7 years. I ain't got a dime from you the whole time I've been here. What do I need, you for now, right? So that was a different way to come home, though, right? Like, I knew I had a safe place where I was going to lay my head every day.
Okay.
Right? And I didn't have to stress about paying for anything.
Right.
So I came home. I went, right to community college.
Okay.
I took a basic computers class. Like, I embraced it. I wanted to be taught it. Now, I'm by no means technical, anything, but guess I can fire off emails. I got, my calendar's synced. I understand the importance of checking my email versus, like, checking Facebook.
Media.
Right?
Yeah, right.
But you couldn't have told me that before. Like, I also know the best way to get a message out to people first coming home is messenger them.
Yeah.
Don't email them. They ain't checking that email, right? Nobody's explained to them how important email is in this world today if you want to excel.
And that's a real thing. Like, I even had a female tell me before, like, man, I don't think I've ever seen a dude, like, checking his email and returning emails. And it was like, huh? This is like a normal practice that, like, a lot of guys and a lot of people in the position that we have been in don't understand. Like you said, you came home with a stable place to live, but, like, that's not the only challenge, because I came home with a couple $1,000, but no place to live. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So the challenges differ from person to person, and those challenges can be triggers to a lot of people. So, like, what do you think prevented it from being a trigger for you?
Well, I was triggered by a lot of different things, right?
Okay.
Going out to eat, the whole thing about wanting your back,
facts.
I mean, that's real,
Yeah,
right?
for
But
sure.
guess what? It was also a real conscious thought at some point after I had been home over a year that I said, I'm gonna make myself vulnerable, right? I can't continue to go and eat at a restaurant with my wife based on seating. Like, I don't want to be here. Come on, we're gonna go somewhere else because my back's to the door. Like, you can't operate that way.
Yeah,
right?
It's hard to live.
And
like
it's traumatic though, to a certain degree, right? So I didn't realize it then, but I was forcing myself to just get
Move
comfortable
through life.
in those moments, right? Like, you and I have discussed how rude people are.
Facts.
These shoulder bumps, what happened in the joint? You shoulder bump somebody and say, my bad, bro.
Yes, sir.
Just my bad.
Sir.
Just acknowledge it. Just acknowledge
that you touched another person.
What happens if you don't, bro?
I personally would liably grab you. I might have grabbed you by your shoulder. Come here.
So what could, but somebody could, like,
it could be a real issue
could
just
plug
from a
you,
bump.
right? Like,
yeah.
like people have gotten stabbed.
Facts.
Right? People have
Facts.
gotten smacked in the head with big ass
Facts.
master locks because they bumped somebody and didn't say, excuse me, bruh. That's it. That's simple.
It's that simple.
Cost you your life.
Facts. That's
But
real.
out here, they just bump you and keep going like you a punk.
Ooh. And they don't even be knowing who you are.
No clue.
And I don't even want to talk about
But
that on
but
here.
you know what I'm saying though? Like,
Hey, but I was gonna say,
that traumatized me. When you talk about, like, what was hard, like getting used to society's norms. All right, what was really crazy was going into the grocery store.
Yes, that was
Like, I remember going in there by myself with my bridge card, right? Because my brother ran a restaurant, and his girl ran a restaurant. They were both managers in the restaurant industry, and they only really bought groceries like fresh one day a week when they both had the day off where they made meals. Otherwise, they pretty much ate out, right? So I was responsible for my own food. That was pretty much my only. I didn't have to pay utilities. I didn't have to pay rent. Nothing. Feed myself. And I got this bridge card with all this money. So I was like, okay, bet. But going through that yeah, right? But going through up in all these choices and not knowing really how to cook anything outside of a microwave?
Yes, sir.
Or a stinger?
Yes, sir.
Right? Like, I was overwhelmed.
I think I still am to an extent.
Oh, yeah.
To this day, I still don't touch certain shit in the kitchen. Not because I don't know how to do it. It's just, that's too much. It's just too much. Like, I can go fry an egg, or I can go make me some pancakes, or I can go make me a burger, but, like, it's literally, damn, that's like too much. Ain't nothing I can just throw in the microwave. I'm literally still like that.
Yeah.
So I didn't even realize that part of, like, small things will come out, will reveal themselves in your transition over time. I'm 7 years removed almost. This summer it'll be 7 years that I've been free. And I'm still having those
I'm coming on 8.
Yeah, so
right?
it's
like we were right you
next.
know what I mean?
Yeah, you and my brother got the same year out there. Y'all got out the same time. You and Sydney got out the same year. Yeah. So damn. After that, all right. So shoot, what are you doing here? Like, all right, you're out of prison. You're in Lansing. You're at Risky Studios. You're here at 17 Winners Podcast. So, like, how do we get here?
Okay, so we were talking about the program on the inside, right?
Okay. Yep.
We did that for like 5 years, 4.5 years. Come home. We want to still do that work, right? We want to, so Mario Bueno, Cameron Colts, myself, we start Luck Inc., right? Leaders Under Correct Knowledge.
Yes, sir.
And what that was to us was a platform because we wanted to work with kids, right? We weren't thinking about doing reentry, which is later what we transitioned to.
Right.
Well, what mainly we're known for, right, with folks on the inside was because we started doing that work. But initially we just wanted to work with young people. We wanted to talk about the decision making that we made and how that led to at a very young age. Like you said, like a lot of the things that caused me to commit these acts against society started from a very young age. And when I realized that, then I realized that we wanted to talk to youth that were quote unquote at risk. And so when we went to the schools, and oddly enough, you know, I got to give credit where credit is due. Mario Bueno had went to work for Harvey Santana, who was a state legislator, right? Yeah. Whose wife is currently a Michigan State Senator, right? Sylvia Santana.
Okay.
And when he went to work there, because Harvey was a product of Detroit Public Schools, and he was, I think he was like deputy vice chair of like the House of Appropriations, which is, you know, that's that money committee.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they
decide
where money goes, right?
Yeah, they control the
appropriations is determining where the cheese is at. Mm-hmm. All right.
So Harvey tasked Mario with going into Detroit Public Schools, and he wants an assessment. And so that was how we got into Detroit Public Schools. And we started to work with youth, talking about critical thinking, effective communication, you know, talking about ethics, ethical reasoning. And what opened the door for that was chess clubs.
Okay.
Started playing chess.
Okay.
Because now you can converse, right? You got a chessboard between at some point, right? Yeah. It begins, and what does it do? It helps them to have some forethought, right? Stop playing checkers with your life. Let's start playing chess. Yeah. Start thinking 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 moves down the line.
Yeah.
You know, and so we began to do that, and we were really, you know,
getting into it.
We felt like we were still living our purpose, just like we were doing on the inside. Yeah. So when we got all those core skills on the inside and so-called graduated from the program, mm-hmm. you know, we began to start facilitating the general population the same skills that we were taught.
Right.
And then we developed the housing units so that we could practice everything we learned. Well, that just kept going with us on the outside. So I started painting. You know, Cam was working at a produce place. Mario was, you know, working at I think his stepdad's doctor's office, you know, like answering the phone and cleaning the bathroom. Like, you know, we were all just doing stuff.
Yeah, right.
Trying to make ends meet. I was doing the painting. You know, friends and family. Mario's mom and dad's deck was the first one I did when I came home, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we felt alive when we were working with young people. Right. We were training people, right? In these disciplines that made such an impact on us.
Right.
And the crazy thing is, though, we got kicked out of Detroit Public Schools, right?
Y'all get kicked out of the school system, man.
So they wanted to give us money. They wanted to contract us. Some of these principals where we were in there volunteering, doing this, they were like, no, we want to pay you guys. Like, we want to really take this program. And like, you guys are working with some of these young folks that nobody else can get through to. Like, they listen to you. So we want this to work. So when that happens, right, we have to start filling out paperwork. What else has to happen? You got to do a background check. Yeah. We ain't going to pass no background check, which we all knew, right? But we're going through the process. They can waive it or do whatever they want, basically. Problem was, at the time, the police chief, because Detroit Public Schools has their own police chief, their own police department to a certain degree.
Just for the school.
Just for a school. Let's keep this in perspective.
Right. He
told Mario and I, we'll never come into DPS schools, right? I ain't going to say who got the contract that we were getting. I'm not going to say they were retired Detroit police officers. I'm not even going to throw that in the mix.
They ain't going to put that out there.
I ain't going to throw that in the ethers like that. But it was. And so we had to make a decision, right? We were essentially told to stay out of Detroit Public Schools. Were we going to do that? Oh, we just weren't going to get paid for it. Okay. And so we still went because we looked at it like, man, we've been through so much for everything wrong. If you're going to lock me up for this,
let's go.
Then go ahead. Like, you put them cuffs on. I'm not going to go out there and do anything wrong to break the law per se.
Right. Right.
But if you're going to criminalize me for wanting to help somebody, then I'm willing to roll those dice. You know what I mean? So we stayed working in the schools and actually ended up getting contracted with a 6-figure contract to work in River Rouge, which wasn't in Detroit. So we was like deuces anyway. Right? We're going to go help these young folks, and we're actually going to get paid for it. And we did that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we brought T. Grizzly to their school.
I remember that.
Remember
yes,
that? Like,
I remember that. These are the guys that brought T. Grizzly to the school when he came home.
Surprise. I mean, you want to talk about a school that went bananas in the gym.
I bet. Yeah, that was when he first came home. He was on fire. I remember that.
Yeah. Listen, it was funny. My youngest daughter was there with one of her friends, and she just literally started crying, right? I was just like, this is crazy. So, yeah, that was dope. And we worked with the parole officer, his parole officer. And so that was part of it. Like, he wanted to do some things.
Because you was doing some. Yeah, right.
So, we were at after the whole school debacle. Now we're home a couple years.
Okay.
Right? We're going to college. We're living. We're starting to do things, get married. Some of us are having kids. We could now start helping people come home. Like you said, what was different this time? Well, there was a whole lot of different things, right? Mindset was one, but again, understanding resources, what's out there, what people really need.
Yeah.
So we started in the reentry phase, right? And we started training people that were coming home in the same discipline. And, it saved us. So that was the funny thing. Like, everybody thought we were out there helping all these people. But what people didn't realize was we were really helping ourselves.
It keeps you busy.
Right?
It keeps you doing something.
I mean, we're getting paid to do good deeds, right?
Right.
Help our fellow man.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing.
Whereas, if we give no resources, we know on average it costs $150 a day to keep somebody in the county jail. Why can't you put those same resources towards keeping them out of the county jail to begin with? Giving them some kind of skills, tools, career training. Use that money than putting them in a county jail. Like, how is that helping the community?
Right.
We're not. We're just draining further resources. You know what I mean?
Sense.
Like, it's so simple, but yet so difficult because, America is in love with incarceration.
It's systematic. It comes all the way down through a pipeline of persona non grata. The people who are not desired are not desired. Therefore, we need a way to just keep them off to the side without it being something that I have to deal with actively. And that's essentially what they've gotten it to, where it's technically no longer slavery and it's no longer picking on choosing a specific people.
But it is slavery because the 13th Amendment allows for what? The enslavement of the imprisoned.
Yes.
It allows for it.
Yes, sir. Fact.
So where America thinks that slavery has been abolished and we are so far away, it hasn't.
It has not.
It hasn't. It just hasn't. And we still have debtors' prisons and debtors' jails, and we still criminalize being poor.
Okay, so let's talk about the day of empathy then, because those were a few points that came from that today. First of all, what is the day of empathy? Because you gave me a little bit more information on it even as we got in the door here. So break down the day of empathy nationwide.
So National Day of Empathy is when we want the whole country to look at the criminal injustices being served on America. Okay? What does empathy mean? It means trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes or understanding of their feelings.
Right.
So what we're asking the country to do, we kick it off in Michigan because when the actual National Day of Empathy is, our legislators aren't in session. So it wouldn't do a whole lot of good, right, if they're not here to hear our message. So we kick it off every year, and what it does is it spotlights what's being done in the criminal injustice system, and there is no justice in our system. A lot of times it's criminal legal system or injustice system. I typically don't use justice because we're not concerned with justice here in these United States.
Right.
Not by any stretch of the means.
I kind of do the same thing with like prisoner reentry. I call it community reentry because I'm not like re-entering prison. I'm re-entering my community after prison. So that makes sense. So like, all right, there was like, 4 points today at the one in Michigan, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about ending juvenile life without the possibility of parole. Okay. There's brain science that says why we shouldn't do it, but there's also just common decency and humanity and understanding that 14, 15, 16, 17, even, and I'll go even higher, right? 18,
because you even
19,
get points for turning 26
right?
in
Absolutely,
penitentiary.
right?
Yeah.
And guess what? And also, coincidentally, in the penitentiary, you get points. And out here, what happens? Your car insurance, right?
Yes,
Why
sir.
is that? Because your frontal cortex, the frontal lobe, is fully developed.
Right.
Okay, girls, it's about a year sooner. Okay, that whole they mature and smart, that's real. As much as I hate to admit it, right? But
the science is real.
Yeah, the science is real, right?
The science is real.
And so what this is saying is we're second to Philadelphia for locking juveniles up for the rest of their lives, putting them in cages forever. We're second in the country. I don't want to be, I don't want to be in that category.
Right.
And so today was about that. We had the big Miller decision with the Supreme Court, which said that it was cruel and unusual punishment to do that. But all it does is it allows for them to be resentenced, and they can be given life without the possibility of parole
As an
again.
adult.
Yes. Right? They get so it's like they get a second look. What they talked about is we just want to end juvenile life without the possibility of parole, period. Okay? Like, life without parole, just take it off the table for juveniles, regardless of what they've done.
Right.
Right? I mean, obviously, we're usually talking about, the death of another human. And so that's what it's tantamount to. And, for me, but maybe the listeners don't know, I lost a child to gun violence. So, I had to look at, when that happened to me, I had to look at, can I still do this work? Can I still advocate in these spaces? Can I still be involved in this? Because I ran through the whole gamut of feelings, right? I wanted that guy to do life without the possibility of parole. You couldn't have told me, that was wrong.
Right.
In that moment, right? And when me and my family were going through that. And what changed that for me was I know so many people that unfortunately took a life as well, right? One of my best friends in the world, Mario, he took a life at the age of 16.
Yeah.
But he also served 19 and a half years in all adult prisons.
Yeah.
Right? He's also went on to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree from U of M in criminal justice, the bachelor's in accounting from Wayne State.
Yeah, right.
Like he's out here doing his thing.
Yeah.
Right? I know him and a lot of people like him. And so that's what allowed me, once I got past that hurt, that pain, wanting my pound of flesh, to understand that it's still not a smart policy, right? It's not going to bring my daughter back, and it's not going to prevent it from happening to somebody else's daughter. Juvenile, life without the possibility of parole, it's just too late.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
I mean, let's face it, the person that took my daughter's life had just got off parole. So we failed them.
Yeah, that's
The
already
system
too
failed
late.
him. The community that he came home to, they failed him. And not only they failed him, but they failed my family, me, my daughter, who's no longer here. All this could have been avoided, right? And he failed himself. And his children, because he's got children. And he's got family. And you know what? When we went through that whole trial, I can't imagine what they felt like or feel like today. I don't know.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it helped inform on how I look at things, right? Because I also have children still, grandchildren, that I want safe, right? So what does that look like? I want smart policies out there. And the reality is juvenile life without the possibility of parole doesn't make us any safer.
No.
You just don't. You can't convince me otherwise. I'm sorry. I've suffered the greatest loss any human being can by losing a child.
Yes, sir.
And that's just not the answer. It's just not.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. What was the other thing? Another point we went over bail.
Yeah, I mean that's funny, right? How does cash bail? So me and you, we both did same amount of time, right? Similar circumstances to a certain degree. If one of us could post bail and the other couldn't, how is society any safer? On these petty crimes, people that are in jail right now, $500, $250. Listen, I know somebody stayed in jail because of the research we've done for $50 for months. Over $50. Didn't have anybody. Homeless, had mental health issues. Like, who's there for him? Who's he calling? Nobody. So he sat. He just sat. At a cost of $150 a day to who? To all the taxpayers in that county, Wayne County. That's how we're using our resources on a $50 bail? Somebody that can't post it? So we spend thousands of dollars over. And even if he had the $50, like, how is the community any safer? Because he could come up with 50 or 500 or 5,000. How?
How does that make the community safer? How does
there's
bail
some
make
petty
the community
crime.
safer?
Me and you both go to jail for having unpaid speeding tickets. You get out. Your people come get you. They post your $250, $500 bail. I don't have people that can do that, right? Like, if they do that, then they're not paying rent.
Right.
If they do that, then somebody ain't eating.
Yeah.
So, again, how is the community safer because you got out because you had some cash and I didn't because I didn't have cash, right? And it's like, again, it's an assembly line. Well, for this crime, you're just this and this. This is how much this is how much this is going to be. That's not the way it's written in the law. Like, they're supposed to look at you, your ability to pay, your ability.
Yeah, right.
Like, your ability.
Right.
Say you're working in a grocery store, right? And say my ability, I'm working in a factory. Our abilities are different to pay, so you should consider that at a minimum, not just blanket. That's $500. Larceny from $500. Don't care the circumstance. Don't want to know what happened. It's $500.
Right.
How is society safer? I don't know. I've never understood the concept of how money makes us safe.
Now, let me ask you this about this next point. This was the first table discussion that they had today. And it kind of stuck out to me because I, first of all, had never considered it, voting in jail. At what point do you alleviate your right to vote?
When you're convicted.
When you're convicted?
Okay, so if you're in the county jail, okay, your case has not been adjudicated.
Right.
So basically you're in there because you can't afford bail.
Right.
Again, you're generally poor.
Right.
Right? Or of lack of means.
Right.
Right?
That does not relinquish your
that
right
doesn't,
to vote.
I mean, I haven't been found guilty of anything.
Correct.
So when elections come about, how are you taking my rights because I haven't been convicted? That's when they're kind of suspended, so to speak, right? Like when you're in prison, you can't vote. All these different constitutional rights you forfeit once you're in prison. While you're waiting there, so what happens to the people that didn't vote and then got found not guilty? Right? What happens when they got released and the charges got dropped
and are forced
because they made
basically
bail,
accept
right? Like
the conditions of society that they had nothing to do with.
Their vote has to matter. Everyone's vote has to matter. My vote matters to me today, where years ago you couldn't have told me that.
Yeah, I voted. I remember voting the first time when I was living down in Dallas, and I just wanted to do it just for the sake of being able to do it because, hell, so many people fought for the right. It didn't make sense to me. I mean, because whether I believe in the system or not.
Voting rights just started in Florida?
Yeah.
Like just started.
Yes, I do know that.
And they're still.
That was the year that I voted, actually.
And they're still trying to have it to where if you don't pay your fees, you can't vote. Why? Why is it so important to not allow people to vote?
Exactly.
With criminal records or that old court fines and fees. I mean, you got to look deep into this.
And that's kind of the stance I take.
Because typically, who are those people?
Right.
Again, people of what? Little or no means, which are what? Generally people of
poor,
color,
black,
which are
white,
black and brown.
brown.
Yeah, I mean, granted, there are poor white people, right? I'm not saying that, but let's also look at the fact that, and you know, we'll talk about the black community in Michigan. what, 12 to 15% of the population in Michigan is, either African American, right, or black, however they want to be described,
Right.
right? It's 51% of what?
Prison
population.
Yeah, that's
So-
actually. I actually wanted to discuss that a little bit further in another episode because the reality is the way that truth in sentencing affected Michigan over those first 10 years, like you can literally see in the urban, the black, brown, poor white communities where those communities were like ripped to pieces. But you can, on the reverse side, see where rural areas in Michigan, the Ionias, the Kinchelows, the Standishes, these places that like are nowheresville were developed, and now they have a whole economy
They have a whole infrastructure based
based
off
on
of
a prison that is filled with all of the people that were plucked out of these
guess what?
communities in the cities.
And those folks working in those prisons, that's the first time they've encountered black or brown people on a
Yes.
regular basis.
Yes,
And guess what? When is that? That's in prison,
that's in prison.
right? So, again, society's biases that are already out there influencing people. Then you put these people in a prison. They see folks that aren't in their best moments, right? Because, like you said, I remember when 15 years was so far away, I didn't feel like doing something that day. I wasn't doing it. Just whatever. It is what it is. Like, what you going to do? What can possibly be done at this point
Yeah,
that's worse than what I'm experiencing?
Yeah.
I'm straight, right? And they just saw us as what? A paycheck.
exactly,
We were a commodity.
exactly.
For real. We were a commodity. When they talked about closing Newberry, they didn't talk about it costing $51 million a year to run, that it was an old state hospital, that it was deplorable. They talked about what it would do to that community. What about what it does to the communities of all the people inside that prison?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's how far away? 6.5 hours across the bridge. Then another, what, 6 to... So your people got to travel like 12 hours to come visit you.
In Michigan.
In
still.
Michigan.
In Michigan still.
Ain't left the state. And that's okay. By whose standard? I mean,
Yep.
what are we doing up there?
Exactly.
What are we doing in Marquette, Michigan?
Exactly.
When you look at 9,000 people are released from the Michigan Department of Corrections annually, and a third of those people go to the city of Detroit, Wayne County alone.
Yes.
Who do you think those people look like?
Exactly. There's nobody being released into Marquette, Michigan.
Yeah, like that one guy.
That
You know what I
one
mean?
guy.
That one dude.
It's like I think I met him actually. I met the guy. That's like a guy from every one of these places up north. I met a guy from like, what is it called? Stone Mountain or something.
Yeah, Iron Mountain.
Iron Mountain. I
Metamora,
met a guy.
all
from
these
there.
places. I'm like, I don't even know
I
these
met like
places
one guy
exist.
from all of these places. Like he's the city criminal, he's the town criminal. I met this guy. I swear to God, I met him. I did some time up north, man. I did like 4 years up north. I think I met the town criminal in every one of these little towns.
I mean, it was crazy, right? I mean, when you think about DUI legislation, we were talking about clean slate, right?
Right.
Do you know that the DUI legislation wasn't pushed from a bunch of urban liberal Democrats? It was pushed by more conservative people, and they were coming from northern Michigan and the UP. Because that's where a lot of people have DUIs, apparently.
Exactly,
Right? Like, there ain't a lot to do up there.
Don't do nothing but get drunk. Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, but think about that. If that wouldn't have happened for that population, if it wouldn't have been pushed by that constituency, would we have it? Would it have passed?
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because guess what? They weren't concerned about black and brown bodies with DUIs. I promise you that much.
I promise. And all right, and the fourth one, that was women incarcerated, right?
Man.
That has become a bigger issue over the years. I believe the incarceration rate of women has risen by like 25% or something.
They're the fastest growing population right
Yeah.
now in prison.
Yeah,
is women.
that's wild. That's wild.
And you know, in Michigan, we only have one. We have like 20-some men's prisons right now. We have one woman's facility, right? The conditions are very poor, right? From what I understand from the women that I talk to that are in this reform work. You know, we know about the lawsuit, you know, where they can't have men working in the housing unit because of all the sexual inappropriateness that went on. I mean, when you got women that have been in the joint 7, 8, 9 years and they're pregnant.
Yeah.
I mean, how's that happen?
How's that happen?
Right? Like,
Yeah,
how's
right.
that happen?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and they ain't had a visit and whatever. So, you know, I mean, to me, I think the women and the men are very unique. I think that women definitely have a whole different set of barriers, right? Women are you know, especially women that have children, you know, they're looked at as supposed to be more of the nurturer. And so, you know, I can't imagine what a lot of times I think from my understanding is, you know, women go in sometimes with some issues to resolve, whether it's substance use or other things. And when they come home, like how I had this easier transition, you know, generally their kids are with a family member and all of a sudden it's like, here you go.
Right.
Bam. Like, you know, how do they just try to reintegrate, right? Try to take it slow when all of a sudden you got babies all over you again.
Right.
Right? Like, I can't imagine what that's like.
Right.
And so I think that women have a very unique set of challenges that I can't fully explain or understand because I'm not a woman.
Exactly.
Right? But I definitely know from working with women that we're coming home, but also working with women in this reform space, you know, from observing what the work they're focusing on and listening to them, those are the things that concern them, the conditions, you know, that women are forced to endure, you know, not having the same resources that the men do.
Okay.
Right, so I think that, you know, hopefully I'm sure here in the near future you'll have, you know, a woman
I'm
on,
literally
right?
putting it together.
I already know. I seen how
Yes,
how
sir.
that wheel was,
Ding.
right?
All right. So with that being said, to kind of talk about your back 40 experience, like of course we know we did time, so it ain't like one back 40 experience is the exact same as another. But you know, we do have like routines and there's certain stuff that goes on. And I know I done seen some crazy stuff on the back 40. So maybe, you know, tell us a crazy story on the back 40 or what was your thing on the back 40?
Okay, you know, like you said, at different times it was everything happens on the back 40, right?
For
You
sure.
negotiate life and death
On the back 40.
40, like
Yes,
in the
sir.
realest way, right? You
That's
gamble
real.
on the back 40. You can work out on the back 40. You can walk and just clear your head, just get some space, right? Like people will know not to approach. Like you can do all kinds of things on the back 40. But I'm gonna tell you a funny story on the back 40, right? You know, I was beefing St. Louis level 4. I was beefed out with the police, right? Yeah. I always was like one of them dudes. I wrote grievances. Like, you know, you gonna hold me accountable for all this bullshit rules? I'm gonna hold you accountable, right? And so I was known for writing grievances and, you know, I worked in the law library at different points in my bit. And, you know, I remember going out to the back 40 and it was snowing. And a lot of times, you know, a lot of police hated to be out there when the weather was bad. They didn't like to be out there in the cold, right? Yeah. They didn't like it. So St. Louis level 4, you got locked on the back 40, right? There was no choice. They had the gun towers, but they had police out there. And, they started messing with me, told me to take my coats off. So I had a Dickies on, but I also had that State Boy on. And so I was like, oh, this is where we at today, huh? I mean, it's snowing like pretty good.
Yeah.
Right? It's cold. And they start taking my coats. So here's this one. Here's this one. Now, they talking junk and
shaking.
So what do I do? I pull my shirt off, drop it on the ground, and I drop my pants all the way to my knees, right? And I just got boxers on. And I got my knee, and my pants are at my knees, and I put my arms out for like a shakedown,
Do your
right?
Shakedown, yeah.
And when they turned around and finally paid attention to me and noticed me standing there, snowing, no shirt on, pants down to the knees, just standing in boxers, like waiting for my shakedown, they was like, what are you doing? Talking. I said, what you talking about? We ain't having fun?
I thought we was going there.
This is what y'all asked for. This is what you want.
Yeah.
I figure you taking my clothes off, you must want a strip search. So come on, do your thing.
Let's
now,
get it.
What happens when I leave the yard? I got to write that grievance, right? Like, I'm asking them to check the camera.
Oh, that grievance.
Like, they told me to strip on the yard. Like, this, you know, I mean, these were like This was the war games that you had to play with these people, right?
It was.
Because you ain't going to lose.
Right.
You ain't going to beat me. I'm going to find a way. And so that was like a funny story on the back 40. But like you said, I mean, I've witnessed some horrendous shit on the back 40.
Yeah,
and
sure.
the reality is you just keep it moving.
Yeah,
if you don't know the person, you don't then if you ain't willing to end up just like them or take it to that level, then you just keep it moving because it ain't your problem. It ain't your, like you said, it ain't your business, right? But I've also had a chance to walk with folks and learn, right, and grow. So everything, like you said, happens on the back 40. It just depends on where you're at in your bit. For sure. Right, on like what you're interacting on. But the one thing we all know, when you walk in the back 40, if it gets quiet,
you know what time it is.
You got to put your head on a swivel because something's about to jump, right? Like it ain't never quiet in the penitentiary unless there's mad tension
something going on.
Right?
It ain't never quiet in the penitentiary.
Like you compete and if you game conscious and you peep what's happening in your neighborhood, and that back 40's your neighborhood, like you know who's with who and who's representing what and how and you see when people start moving. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And you know who you moving with and how you gonna move, right? So, those are the things on the back 40 like people didn't understand. There was literally life and death back there. Some people don't know, like, two people politicking might have saved somebody's life.
I mean, it usually is that way. I mean, because the wrong altercation between two people could literally implode the whole yard.
Cause a war.
It literally can just become a whole war just because these two guys got into it and they are loved by so many other people. I've seen that so many times on that yard. All right, man, I appreciate you coming through, bro. Yeah. I appreciate you building with me. I guess I'm about to wrap the podcast up. I do want to wrap it up with this last, just like the words of wisdom that I give at the end. And it's not necessarily even words of wisdom. It's kind of just like the back 40, man, where it's the lockdown time. You know how it is when you get behind that wall at nighttime. I ain't talking about when you in there with your bunkie. I'm talking about when them times where you in that mug and it's just you. The door slammed, you ain't got no friends, you ain't got no family, you ain't got nobody to call on. It's just you. And you got to figure it out. That's the I think the hardest part about the bit is getting through those times. So in those times, I think is when I was able to find myself. So I like to end the podcast on that. You got anything you want to give them for the words of wisdom and on lockdown time?
I would have to say that it was education, right? It was books that was, to me, was the great equalizer and helped to give me understanding to make it through those times, right? It wasn't the weight pit. It wasn't lifting, the most, which, that was certainly a part of my routine, right? But it was the mental, right? Sure. Because I seen what it did to folks, sure. Right? There was people that went into solitary, right? They cracked. There was people that didn't come out. Yeah. Some hung themselves, some were hung by the police, but they didn't think their way through it. At the end of the day, they didn't think their way through it. And so for me, that was the one thing that I felt helped equalize and kind of normalize me was education. That's it.
That was perfect, bro. I think the key words from that is thinking your way through it. Thinking your way through it. I think that was the best thing you could have said. With that said, I appreciate y'all listening. Again, this is 17 Winners of Brother Mike X. Peace.
Peace.